Hey everyone. On this episode of Teeter Talks, I chat with Lindsay Taylor, also known as the Food Doula. She is an award-winning cookbook author, a perinatal nutrition expert, and the founder of the Professional Perinatal Nutrition Program. Now, the information in this podcast is not just for women who are pregnant or at the postpartum stage. Her insights and recipes and all the good information that she shares is valuable for everybody at every stage of life. I cannot emphasize how fun and relatable and easy she makes cooking and coming up with highly nutritious meal ideas. She was so fun to chat with, and I know you're going to get so much out of this episode. Everybody, please enjoy Lindsay Taylor. Hey, Lindsay, how's it going?
Good, Marissa. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm so glad we get to do this. You and I met, I guess, a couple of months ago now. Who knows where time flies? At an International Women's Day event. You were on a panel that I was hosting. It was the first time I met you. And I was so impressed with your story, how you spoke, your messages, and all the great stuff that you were doing. And I thought, I got to get her on the podcast and have a conversation. And here we are. So welcome.
Thank you so much. And thank you for those kind words. You made it so easy. You're such a gifted facilitator. It was so fun to be up there with you at the event.
Thank you. It was a great event. We had a great time. So you are the food doula.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how this came to be? Because I know this was a huge leap of faith. This was a pivot in your life and your career. You have such presence online under that handle, the Food Doula. You're doing amazing work, but maybe take us back a little bit and talk to us a little bit about how you got there and maybe how you chose that name.
Yeah, definitely. This wasn't my intent ever to do the work that I'm doing now. My
Amazing.
training, as so many people find themselves in a new career, my training, I had a master's degree and worked at a health research institute for 10 years of my career. And when I became pregnant, I had this cognitive dissonance moment of I see the research. I know all the things that are supposed to be good for me, for my body, for my baby, as I go through this transition, but I wasn't really doing any of it. And that
You're
was
like,
the
I don't put
reality.
any of those things in my mouth.
Yeah, I'm like actually not doing it. And I started to think about the fact, hey, if I'm so interested in the research, I'm the person pulling it up and reading it and reading all the books. I'm so interested in nutrition and so interested in the health research. But my reality is different. No one's really taking that research and communicating it to me in a way that feels like it makes sense, that I can actually do when I have low energy because I'm pregnant, when I don't feel like eating vegetables because I'm pregnant. And so throughout my pregnancy, I started to feel like if I feel like this, I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Right.
And I had a lot of guilt and shame about that, like almost like I was someone on the outside, but someone different on the inside who had that intent, but wasn't really practicing what I was preaching, And so I started to think there has to be a better way here. If I'm feeling this guilt and shame and I have the intent to eat well and provide for my body and my baby, then others do too. So I started talking about it. I started an Instagram account when when I was on maternity leave
Mm.
and started talking about food and easy ways to feel good and the things that no one was teaching us about what our bodies needed during the time period of pregnancy and postpartum. And it started to connect and it got me involved in postpartum and pregnancy in a way that I didn't intend because it became very clear that there were gaps. There were
Mm.
gaps in the system. And when I sort of went into this forum and started talking to women online, it became abundantly clear that women were feeling left behind. They were feeling like disempowered and bad about themselves, just like I was, because they weren't getting any good advice. So, because of those gaps in support, I actually became a doula for a little while, which is somebody that supports women on that journey, right?
Yeah,
Through
love it.
their pregnancies and their births and their postpartums. And so while I was um, serving families in that capacity, I was cooking and sharing. I started this Instagram account, as I mentioned. This is like 9 years probably
Oh my
now.
goodness.
And,
Yeah.
it started to connect. And so I started to share recipes more. And that's when I actually got an offer from a publisher that, hey, the way you talk about food and pregnancy, I think that there's something here. It feels different. It feels like it's connecting. What do you think? And so at that time, I was 10 years deep into a career in health research and had spent, many, many years in my education and
Yes.
training and all of that. But I just had this deep passion to do it. And the reason why I adopted that name, the Food Doula, was yes, I was a doula by training, but it was more about the spirit that that word embodied to me. Was
Mm.
when we talk about being in this realm of nutrition, it sometimes feels clinical. It sometimes feels like you have to be perfect. It doesn't feel like we can do it well unless we're focused on not eating foods that we love, unless we're focused on like our weight. And none of those things resonated with me. It wasn't aligned with my food philosophy. So I wanted to keep that word doula in my business name because that's really the heart of the way that I talk about food and nutrition, is in a way that walks hand in hand with the reality that women are going through in their day-to-day life and doesn't ignore that.
I love that. I mean, I had a doula for both my
Oh,
pregnancies,
yay.
and
Wow,
yeah,
nice.
people were like, really? Because to me, the way my friend explained it to me, because she had one, was they are there for you. And I was like, isn't that what my husband is there for? And the doctor, like, no, no, no. It's just someone to really guide you through. And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's a very kind of approachable way, even though it sounds a little woo woo out there.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't. It was like, this person's really just there to make all the things that you don't know about, all the things you're afraid of, all the unknowns, just make them really accessible and digestible and really meet you where you are in this process. And now,
exactly.
you hear of people hiring end of life doulas
Yep.
and, various doulas for various stages of life, depending what you're going through. They become this like guide or this Sherpa to
Yeah.
kind of just really support you through that journey. And so by becoming a food doula, I so appreciate that you made food more relatable, more accessible. Yeah, I mean, you talk about eating vegetables during pregnancy. I don't think I ate a vegetable to my third trimester with both
Right.
of my pregnancies.
And that's reality.
Right. And I am a great eater typically, but nope, just not what I wanted. But to your point, there's a lot of guilt and there's a lot of unknown. There's a lot of, mixed messages. And again, I should put this huge disclaimer out there. If there's men listening or people who are not having babies or haven't had babies in a long time, you share a lot of content and insights just on how to nourish yourself and how to just make really great nourishing, how to kind of, wade through the different myths or theories or fads. So I would say, keep listening because I love following what you do because you give great kind of meal ideas for kids, for adults, men, women. So talk a little bit more about that because obviously you did like health research, but did you have to figure out your way around the kitchen and fall in love with being in the kitchen? Or did you always like to cook and kind of experiment with recipes?
I was the opposite of, I feel like everybody who's in food was like, yeah, when I was 3, I was cooking in the kitchen with my grandma and I always loved it. I had zero interest.
That's
I
me.
hated
Okay.
cooking. Yeah, honestly, I wasn't interested at all. I never learned. When I went to university, I was just that kid that could make a grilled cheese and I had my George Foreman grill to do my grilled chicken. Like
Perfect. Yes.
that's where I was at. And I think that's the reality. Even people that go to school and become trained in nutrition, there's no culinary component to that, which I think is the most massive missing piece. Is you can sit in a classroom and learn about research and learn about nutrients in an academic sense, but if you're not applying it, I really don't
Mm,
feel like we can help the folks that we're trying to help to
right.
make nutrition feel doable and to feel the way they want to feel through food. So to me, it was really connecting that. I grew to love food and cooking through making nutrition real, which is what I wanted. I saw that nobody felt that supported by the nutrition information they were reading. For instance, the pregnancy example, all of the guidelines from the research are about what you need for the baby, right?
Right.
It's not really about you, but you deserve to feel good and energized and feel good in your body and all of those things. So when I started to say, I'm going to get into the kitchen and start coming up with recipes, I came at it from that academic lens of, okay, the reality is if we're pregnant, we have low energy. So, but we need all these X, Y, and Z nutrients. How do I create recipes that get you that stuff that you need, but like are mostly carbs and only take 15 minutes and actually are tolerable if you're not feeling that well? So that lit a fire under me to start getting really interested in seeing food and cooking in a different way.
I love that. I always say I don't love cooking, which is not entirely true. I mean, when the stars are aligned and I have time and I know what I'm cooking and I'm cooking for other people, I do enjoy it. I have done it. I can cook. I much prefer the eating part though.
Me too.
That's really where I excel. But I do see the value, and it's always on the top of my, New Year's resolution list, right up there with reading more books and having more fun every year, is cooking more. Because and you said something really interesting. I mean, I think a lot of us know what we need to put into our bodies to a certain degree. Okay, big thing around protein right now, fiber, different nutrients. But how do I turn that into a dish? Like, how do I turn that into a meal that's not like, here's a chicken breast. Okay, now I need to add some carbs and I need to add some veggies, I need to add some fiber. How do I make that into something that is a full meal? Like, I don't know about you, but I grew up with a full meal on the table. My dad on the Italian side, there was always a full table of options. How do we create a meal? And I'm constantly thinking about that, where I want to create that experience. I want to cook full, complete meals, not just put food in my mouth to kind of
Yeah.
get out the door and do the next thing. But you've really made it accessible. Was that a learning curve? Like, what was the toughest part for you getting in the kitchen, not only figuring out the recipes, but having to incorporate all these different elements around nutrients and nutrition, and also kind of sharpen your skills in terms of building out recipes? What was the challenge or the toughest part of that?
I think the challenge was I was such a beginner. I wasn't someone that
Mm,
went to culinary school, that was a chef, that knew all of these exciting techniques. It was sort of an embarrassing learning curve because I was like, I don't even know how to cut a sweet potato into wedges to make fries. Like, this is where I'm at, right? Like, this is new to me. But I didn't want that to stop me, because what I realized very quickly was it wasn't just me. So something that I thought was sort of embarrassing that others might feel like was basic, like how do you actually chop a sweet potato correctly? Or how do you actually open an avocado? Folks want to know that. And that's what I
yeah.
realized was we don't want to know how to make this like fancy meal that we're never going to do because we're missing those basics. So I think approaching it from that way of, hey, I'm just learning, and so all of the recipes that I develop
Mm,
are doable. And if you've never bought that ingredient at the kitchen, and that's often where a lot of us go wrong, like you said, it's very popular right now to talk about how much protein we need and that we all
right.
need protein. And it switches all the time, right? What's the most
Yeah. How
fad-based
much
nutrient?
is enough protein? Yeah.
Right. But you're not going to go to the grocery store and put protein in your cart and then go home and just cook protein. Like, we need to make that into an actual meal that fuels us, our bodies. We need to know how to cook that protein in a
Yes.
way that we can actually do it, or all those greens we're supposed to eat for our fiber, so it doesn't just sit in the fridge and go bad, which I think a lot of people relate to that as well. We want to use the groceries we buy, we want to cook more, but the reality is our lives have changed and we don't have 2 hours of time to cook every day and have that beautiful spread of so many options on the table for our family. It's just we've lost a lot of that in the
Yeah.
flow and the busyness of our society today.
So this was a big shift for you in terms of, you talked about the learning curve, and maybe it was great because you were meeting people where they were, to say, I'm not an experienced chef either. I'm not comfortable around the kitchen. So you were really starting from a starting point that was relatable for people, not just in what you were eating and making, but how you were pulling that together for themselves and their families. But talk to me a little bit more about, there was a career shift here. You had a job, you had a career. At some point, you had to, and we really talked about this at the event, you had to bet on yourself and you had to make a decision to say, I'm going all in on this. I think there's something here. What did that look like to you? What did those conversations, how did those go in your head, maybe with your partner, with your friends and family? Talk to me a little bit more about the experience of really kind of going all in on this.
Yeah. So when I got the cookbook deal, as I mentioned, I was 10 years into another career. I hadn't made a single dollar in the world of nutrition or cookbooks or food in any way, shape, or form. But I just felt like this was something that I wanted to do. And so I was at an impasse. And there were two very clear, very different paths I could take at that point. One was I stay in what's comfortable. I stay in the career that I've worked for so long to establish. I make the cookbook and it kind of does its thing. Maybe a couple people find it and buy it, and maybe I help a few women feel confident feeding their bodies in pregnancy. Or the other path was I fully bet on myself and I go all in on this, because what I knew to be true was a cookbook itself is not a business. A cookbook itself does not pay the bills, but a
Mhm.
cookbook is an opportunity. And I could take that and build a business around this cookbook in order to do this for my living and help hopefully a lot more women and get that out there, get the message out there. And so that's all it was. It wasn't that I had a guarantee. It was that I fully decided I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to put the work in and believe that there's going to be another side of this. And
Mhm.
that side is going to come because of all this work that I've done about really feeling like I have something to say and contribute to this conversation, and believing that the rest would come. And it did. I'm so glad I made that decision at that time.
Yeah, I mean, it's always this question mark of, that old expression, build it and they will come. Like if I
Yeah.
really lean into this and I'm confident, if I can create something that the right people will find it, and it's worked out very well for you. You have a significant following, you have a very engaged following. Your content is so powerful, and you are working on your second cookbook. What is the
Yes.
biggest difference between the first and the second cookbook in your mind?
That's tricky. The first, it's a very vulnerable thing to do a
Mm.
cookbook. And it was very new for me because it felt like I was working on it in my house, in my kitchen, on my laptop. But then there's this moment of, oh, other people are going to see this.
I have to share this eventually. Yes.
And people are going to put reviews on Amazon, and that was a vulnerable place to be of, people could review this terribly. What if this is horrible and nobody likes it? And so that held me back a little bit with the first
Mm.
one. And so with this second one, I have to believe that the things that I was worried about for the first one, maybe like, are these recipes going to be too basic, or are people not going to think they're delicious? And believing that book connected. So instead of trying to do things differently and learn more and become a culinary expert and make cookbooks like chefs make, I didn't want to do that. I really wanted to stay in the same vein as I was for
Mm.
the first cookbook and continue on to the things that resonated the most. So with the first book, what resonated the most was a lot of snacks that you can make at home that have a lot more protein and fiber and micronutrients. And then the other thing was a lot of simple family meals. So I had a whole collection of different things in the first book, but having that, and now it has been out for about 4 years, gave me a lot of time to see what my audience wants more of. So I doubled down on those things that
Amazing.
seem to connect the most for this next book. And it's the next journey, right? That first book was mostly for pregnancy, even though it's great, healthy recipes for everybody, as you mentioned. And this cookbook is the next stage in that journey, which is postpartum and early motherhood. And so the food is great for everybody, but I also like to have my books act as sort of a guide where I talk about what does the research say about what you need during this stage and why? Like, what are the mechanisms to understand what your body needs? And then let's make this make sense with
Yeah.
food. What foods fall into that category? And then here's the recipes on, in this section that are going to help you with that, because we need things to be personally relevant for us. So we can
Yes.
care about them, and then we're inspired to maybe make a couple of recipes and see how we feel after that.
I love that. And I want to dig into some of the details. So we talked about kind of the pregnancy journey, postpartum. Now you're going to lean a little bit more into the next phase of life. But again, I follow you. I've had your recipes. If they're good enough for a pregnant person and they're good enough for me,
Yes.
I'm wondering if you see this, before I get to my detailed questions about some of your favorite recipes, but I wonder if you see this evolving into something that you would make for the next phases of life in terms of, teenagers and, aging children and perimenopause, menopause, as if you're focused on the woman as kind of being your target audience. Any thoughts of kind of evolving this over time?
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I have so many thoughts. I think the two, if I was to say, here's what I'm going to do for a third book to make, first of all, the background to this, as I'm sure you can relate, and you might have something to add to this, we're not taught as young
Mm.
girls what's even going on with our body? What even happens during our cycle? What hormones are being released when, and why does that impact how we feel, and our body maybe moves, and maybe our mental health shifts. And so that it starts at such an early age, our feeling of, I don't even, can I name all my body parts? Do I know what's happening at these different points in my cycle, my life?
Mm.
And it sort of bleeds into that feeling unprepared for pregnancy. And then perimenopause is the same. So in thinking through what's next, I feel so compelled to address both perimenopause and also girls.
Yeah.
How do we feed our daughters and
Hmm.
support them in a time that's really confusing when they're in puberty and everything's changing and they're getting their first period and things like that, and having daughters, approaching those stages now myself, I really see that as something
Yes.
relevant. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic, and I would agree. My daughter she's big into soccer, both my kids are, and she did a clinic last year where they actually spent time to talk to them about nutrition at this soccer clinic, where they gave them a little card as a takeaway to say, here's the type of foods that fuel your body before the game. Here's the type of foods that are good to fuel your body after a game, and kind of in between. And, as a family, I mean, my son too, we always focus on nourishing things, and it's great to kind of build it around sports and performance and be able to concentrate. And I think my kids have learned a lot about nutrition and macronutrients because we really talk about it as a family in terms of how to fuel your bodies and how to power your bodies. But I think it requires, and again, it requires a lot of research. You don't really know where to get this information because no one really wants to talk about feeding kids and, all the differences. And of course, working around their palates is always a great time too. But I think there's such a wonderful thing here. But again, I think anyone could go on your page today and take your, quick meal ideas and your very nourishing recipes and feed them to themselves, their family, whatever stage of life you're at. So let's pause there.
Absolutely.
You must have
Yeah.
some favorites. What are some of your favorite go-to snacks where you've really been able to kind of build some real kind of super food, super punch, delicious snacks that nourish people?
Yeah. One of the things is doing baking differently.
Mm.
I'm not a great baker when you're baking proper pies and cookies and cakes and things like that. But I like healthy baking, where you're baking breakfast cookie type
Mm.
snacks that have lots of oats and nuts and seeds, and hemp seeds are in there, and almond flour is in there. So I love that sort of muffin or baked oat cup or breakfast cookie that I like to call all day cookies, just because I don't know that I would eat them for breakfast, but I'd eat them all day long.
Right. Yes.
And things like that, right? Oat bars or protein pancakes that you can stick in the freezer, just pop it in the toaster, and then you've got a
Perfect.
great one-handed snack that's fueling. You didn't have to, buy a processed option, and you can batch cook all of these things, which are really great. But something else that I would love to talk about a lot is savory snacks. So sometimes when we get into the flow of we're really busy, we need to grab a snack instead of a meal or make a little snack plate for ourselves. We're very used to grabbing those things like a granola bar or, a handful of chocolate chips or a muffin, but switching that to savory. Like, what about if you had meatballs in the freezer and you just grabbed a few
Mm.
meatballs in the same way you would grab a few energy balls, or egg cups, the little egg muffins that you
Love
can make,
those. Yep.
right? Or like a breakfast burrito or something like that you can batch cook 18 of them, fill them up, freeze them individually, and then you can grab and go. So I really like to redefine what we can do in terms of snacks that are genuinely fueling and balanced and nutrient dense, but work for the reality of our life, which is that we need it to be fast and we need it to go a long way.
Yeah, you talk a little about meal prep too, and I'd love to get your tips on that. But I want to. There's a quote that you had that I saw on your social that really stuck out to me about this idea of it's more important to be nourished than to fuss over nutrition, or something to that effect, which is what I got from that is I think there's a lot of people who are probably skipping meals because they're not prepared or organized, or they're just kind of grabbing the wrong things in the moment, again because they're not prepared or organized, because life happens, of course. Share a little bit more your philosophy around this idea of it's more important to be nourished than to focus on the details of nutrition.
Yeah. A big part of that is widening the definition of nourishment. So often we think Nourishment is getting the right nutrients. And of course, that's a part of it. But food plays such a massive role in our lives and our connection to others, our friends, our families, and how we feel. So, nourishment also is connection with your
Yeah.
family. Nourishment is also connection to your culture. So, there's a lot of folks that probably think, oh, this cultural food that's important in my family and my relatives, it's not healthy. Maybe I shouldn't eat it. When there's so much value there in nourishing you as a person, the same applies to pleasure and joy. Those belong in your definition of nourishment also. So even if your favorite food in the world is chocolate chip cookies, but you deem that as a non nourishing choice because maybe it's not as nutrient dense as some of the other things in your fridge, you're missing that aspect of nourishment. So
Yeah.
it's really about accepting that those things are valid. Comfort food gets a bad rap. I absolutely think comfort foods are part of nourishment, and it's okay. We shouldn't have to feel bad about that.
I was just having this conversation this morning with a friend of mine about how much joy we get out of sharing delicious meals, how much we look forward to it. Like if it's a day where I know I'm going out for dinner that night and it's going to be delicious, first of all,
Yeah.
I don't have to cook. First of all, I have to think about what
Right.
we're going to like. It's not even the cooking, it's the thinking about what we're going to cook.
Yeah. It's mental energy.
It's and I there's so much joy that comes from food. And you're right. I think about growing up, again on the Italian side, but even on the other side, just a lot of joy and memories built around food and the tradition of preparing foods, the tradition of certain foods being tradition, and just all those moments spent. And this is so crazy, but when I was in my early 20s, I broke my jaw.
Oh
I
my.
was, yeah, well, I was playing slow pitch in like a beer league, and after university, my last year university, and I took a line drive to the face. I
Oh,
was pitching. Yeah, I had played ball for years, and I was a pitcher playing fast pitch. This is my first time playing beer league, and I'm living at home in the summer after university. And my dad goes, "Whatever you do, just don't pitch. Right? You got guys up there; they're going to show off. Well, what do I do?" So serves me right. I shatter my jaw in 16 places, and I end up getting my jaw wired shut
oh
for
no.
3.5 months. Yeah, it's a great way to lose 30
So
pounds.
long. Yeah.
Um, but it's amazing how it just killed so much of my joy through my
Yes.
social life because I could only eat like through a syringe, like I could only eat liquids.
Yeah.
And so people stopped inviting me to like to dinners because they
Right.
felt bad, or
Yep.
even my own family didn't want to eat around me. They felt bad. Um,
Exactly.
it just, my whole social life just came crumbling down because I couldn't eat and I couldn't do things. And eventually I had to tell people, like, invite me. It's okay. I can handle
Yes.
you eating food. But I just noticed how much emphasis we put around that idea of breaking bread with people. And I really like that you call that out, because I do think that there's room for all those joys around comfort food and treats and snacks. And sure, you can make modified versions of it. Like I'm sure there's a way to take a chocolate chip cookie and make it a little bit healthier. So maybe you feel a little bit
Yeah.
less, concerned to indulge. But I do think it's that, it's that 20, that 80-20 rule. I do think it's that 20% that really helps that 80% really stick and helps you stick to that 80%, right? Like, do you follow a philosophy like that around when to indulge or how to indulge? Do you have, I don't know, people have cheat days, people have rules. Like, do you have certain kind of boundaries or rules or things that or not rules, but philosophies perhaps that you try to live by around that?
Yeah. My major philosophy is nutrition by addition, because
Mm,
so often we get lost in the rules and, oh, I'm doing this diet, or, oh, I can't eat these things, these are bad for me, I'm on a diet, I can't eat it. But what happens psychologically is, as soon as we tell ourselves that we shouldn't or we can't, or we get that message put on us from others, what happens in our brain? It puts
yeah.
a spotlight on those things.
Hmm.
And research has showed this again and again and again, right? 99.9999% of diets don't work. And that's why it becomes a very powerful pedestal in our brain. And we're way more likely to eat it than we even were before, because of the rules and the rigid, maybe, box that we've given
Yeah.
ourselves to eat in, for a certain goal or whatever it is. So what works so much better is, instead of saying, oh, I can't eat that, I must remove those things from my diet, it's more about, what can I bring in that makes me feel really good and helps
Mm,
me get whatever I need. If I'm working on my energy or my hormones or whatever it might be, adding foods to my plate gives me that. And what sometimes happens without focusing on it is some of the other things drop off, but that
Yeah.
wasn't even the intent.
Yeah.
But then you can sustain that and feel good.
Yeah. I've always found that introducing more good stuff, when you put so much more good stuff in your diet, and then like the really nourishing good stuff, you tend to not crave the other stuff as much. You tend to not want, to your point, it becomes a distraction. Or because you're eating so much good stuff, if you do have that cookie or that other thing, you're like, well, you know what? I've balanced this out with all these nutrients. And that's really what I've gone to a point in my life. And I think we've probably all done the fad diets and all obsessed over all the things, but I'm really I want to feed this machine so it sticks around and takes care of me for a long time. And I'm really
Absolutely.
focused on how I feel when I eat certain things and how certain things help me take care of myself. And I think that's important. I want to talk about some superfoods. Do you
Yeah.
have your own kind of top list of superfoods that are a must in our diets?
I have ones that I love, but I
Okay.
think something that you just said, which is really interesting, no list or way of eating is going to be best for everybody. For instance,
Right.
my brother can't stomach leafy greens, and my sister can't stomach sweet potato and quinoa. And those are staples in my diet to make my body feel good. And that's what I believe intuitive eating is actually listening and
Yes.
understanding, how does this food make me feel? How does this food make me feel? And being open to that, as opposed to like, oh gosh, I have bloating every day or headaches every day, but I just accept that that's how I have to feel, when there's probably things playing a role there.
Yes.
But there are certainly foods that I like the best for most people.
Is there I know for me, like I love nuts.
Yes.
I love chickpeas. I do love, like, you put a big salad in front of me, I will devour it. Especially if I don't have to make it. If I don't have to make
Yeah,
said
yeah,
big
sure. But
salad.
it's abundant and lots of variety.
Yeah, like a nice hearty slaw. Um, I've really gone to a point where, I really love green smoothies, but they're delicious to me. And I always tell people, I will not eat something at this stage of my life just because it's good for me if it doesn't taste good. I'm only putting things in my mind. So again, I'm adding things into my diet, adding new superfoods and nutrition, nutrients, I suppose, to things that I'm eating. What about you? What are some of your kind of top 5 superfoods that you love?
Likewise, I love green smoothies. I have one every day, even in the winter. I put lots of ginger in it, and I swear it
Mm,
keeps my immune system just rocking on. But I really love seeds. I think seeds are one
mm.
of the best things that all of us can use because they're easy. You don't have to do anything. They don't really take up a lot of space. They don't make us feel extra full. You can sprinkle seeds on your yogurt, your smoothies, your oatmeal, your grilled vegetables, your tacos, literally. And you can tell your kids they're sprinkles. Let's add sprinkles,
Oh, I like that.
like that. It's so great. Whether that's, I like hemp because I think it's so
Mhm.
neutral. I often use that as a replacement for a protein powder. But if it's chia or flax or sesame
Yes.
seeds, they pack so much amazing anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, good fats for us, great fiber, the things that we're missing the most, with such an easy way. There's no cooking, there's no prep, you don't have to do anything at all. So I'm really, really big on seeds. And likewise, I'm really big on eggs. I think
Mm.
that many of us struggle with leftovers and what am I going to eat today? Put an egg on it. It's going to taste
Yes.
different. It's going to be delicious. And
Yes.
eggs, yes. If you think about what eggs are, they literally have every component necessary to sustain life. So they have, again, on that same line of the things we're most likely missing, like our
Yeah.
omega-3 fats and our vitamin D and our vitamin A and lots of other things. We find those in the yolk of an egg. So I know protein is really big and people like to put tons of egg whites, but let's not do that. Let's use whole eggs. We need the cholesterol, we need the saturated fat, we need it all. And they're simple. They don't take a lot of cooking. I think
Right.
adding an egg or two to your day is one of the best things that you can do for your nourishment. Absolutely.
Yeah. And you mentioned the egg cups earlier, keeping those in the fridge. I mean, you can eat those cold, you can heat them up. Making the burrito wraps. I love that you prep a lot of your food and that you don't necessarily put it in the fridge. Cause I think for me, sometimes I kind of don't know what I want until I'm hungry sometimes. I'm not a picky eater. I would say I'm a moody eater, which
Same.
some people in my family would disagree with me, but I'll eat anything. I just may not want that thing right now. But I love the idea of I think people underestimate how quickly you can take something from the freezer and heat it up or, give it life to be able to eat it that day or that morning you take it out. It's not in the fridge, which means it's not going to go bad. You're not going to feel guilty watching it wilt away. It's in the freezer and you can have it whenever you want it. So might as well just make that big batch of whatever you're making that one time. I also love eggs. I grew up with someone my dad, who would take leftovers, anything we had the night before, take out food and literally just throw it in a pan with some eggs.
Right?
Christmas stuffing, Christmas
Magic.
dressing, a turkey dinner, anything. It would just go in an egg and the egg would just bind it. And there you go. You had a full meal. So I thought that was funny. I thought definitely familiar.
Yes.
You mentioned healthy fats. Talk to me a little bit about the importance of healthy fats and what are some of the best sources in your mind?
Yeah. So this is one of the things that we have been taught, basically a relationship with fat, where we have equated fat from food with body fat. And that's
Mm-hmm.
actually not correct. We need food from fat because, especially as women, that's what our hormones are made of. So, for many of us, sometimes when we don't feel at our best, it could be our hormones and it could be maybe our mental health. And fat is the most important nutrient for our brains, for our mood, for our mental health. It literally builds our brain. So that's one of the things that I like to add in with that nutrition by addition is instead of being afraid of fats and cutting them out, it's adding in the fats that we need the most. Our body needs a
Yeah.
certain ratio of certain fats to be anti-inflammatory and be healthy. And we're getting a lot of a certain type of fat, omega-6 fats, because it's in everything that we buy at the store. It's not that they're inherently evil. It's just that they're in everything. So we need to balance that with some omega-3 fats. So we get those. The best source is fish, any type of seafood, especially salmon, if you like it. Adding that to the diet. We get some from eggs, that important type of fat. And then we also get it in our nuts and seeds. And that's so powerful to feeling better, especially if you have like forgetfulness or you feel like, oh, my
Mm-hmm.
brain is so foggy, or any issues with your mood. Adding in those fats can really be supportive.
Love it. I think a lot of people, to your point, are really low on ratios with healthy fats and don't realize it. Like again, everyone's going so hard on the protein.
Yes,
Protein good, carbs bad. What about everything else, right? So
I
it's people,
know.
we get so caught up in the narratives, and it's like, well, wait a minute, how much protein do you need, and what about the ratio of other things? What about fiber, in your opinion? Why do we need fiber, and what are the best sources in your opinion?
Yeah. Fiber is so overlooked. It's so important. Fiber, especially for us women, and probably for everybody who's trying to have good energy and manage disease, like you said, longevity for as long as
Mm-hmm.
possible. It's all about inflammation. And one of the biggest sources of inflammation is unstable blood sugar. And unstable blood sugar is what gives us crashes in the afternoon. It often
Mm-hmm.
gives us sugar cravings. It often gives us headaches. It often makes us moody. And one of the best ways to have more balanced blood sugar is to add fiber, because what fiber does is it slows down the release of sugar molecules like glucose into your blood. When we don't have a lot of fiber, it can all be released at once. And that's a problem. That's not good for our bodies. So it all gets taken up into our cells at once. And we get a big roller coaster. And then we crash later. And that's when we feel terrible and we crave sugar because our body is empty. It's depleted. It needs it. But when we have fiber, it slows down. So we have a nice steady release of energy into the blood. And that's really, really powerful. For many of us, our blood sugar is not great, and that's contributing to poor health. And fiber is and protein, one of
Yeah.
the best ways to support ourselves and our guts, our microbiomes. We need that fiber.
Any of your favorite sources of fiber?
Yeah, so often we think about what I call more like rough fiber, like these Brussels sprouts and broccoli and beans, and those are all amazing sources of fiber. But for some of us, we might not digest that well. Or if
Mm.
you're new to adding fiber, you don't want to go crazy with those foods. So I like what I call soft fiber foods. That's going to be a little easier on your digestion. You might not think of them as like a lot of roughage. It's things like raspberries and avocado. Those are they're just as high in fiber as things like broccoli are, but they're a little easier to digest. Another one that I love is chia seeds. Chia seeds hold 10 times their weight in water. They're so high fiber. They're really good at clearing you out. If anything needs to come out, if you're struggling with constipation, chia seeds, when you give them some time to absorb and get really gel like, that's a very powerful food.
Yeah, our family discovered this chia seed jam recipe a couple
Yeah.
months ago. And I've been very thrilled to share it with people that I make jam. And
Yeah.
there are some disbelievers in my family because I am probably not the type to make jam.
But it's
But
easy, right?
it's so easy. And the funny thing is that my
So
kids never ate
fast.
jam. Like they were never into jam. My
Interesting.
daughter once thought it was the same as toe jam. So there was a lot of
Oh no.
disgust and, no willingness to try jam. But also I never really fed it to them because it was just a lot of sugar that, unless you're making it
Yeah.
homemade and you know what's in it. But this chia jam, as you know, is basically just I mash up some frozen raspberries. I throw in some chia seeds. I let it sit. You can
Yeah.
sweeten it or eat it tart, depending on how sweet
Yeah.
that batch of raspberries is. And I put in a jar in the fridge and it lasts us a couple weeks. And every time my kids have a spoonful of that, they're getting a huge spoonful
Yeah.
of fiber. They don't
Yeah.
know it. They love it. But it's
Yeah.
been such a win. And I've been giving it to family members. You've got to try this. This is amazing.
The
Yeah.
best.
So and it's, again, I love when you can find new ways to make things and just adding a little bit of extra nutrients to things that you love to enjoy, but you just got to modify it a little bit, change it up. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I had chia jam this morning, blueberries. It's so
Amazing.
fast.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. We don't have to do these traditional things that feel tricky, like making
Right.
jam or making baking the right way. We can do it an easier way that's more beneficial for our body and for our time.
Yeah, like we make cottage cheese bagels every week too. Like what a
Amazing.
treat to have that. And so I do
Absolutely.
love that we've been able to modify. I kind of just referenced my kids, but what about some tips for parents or people out there trying to get nutrient dense food into their kids? You don't even get me started on lunches. Like my kid eats one thing in his lunch every day, and it's always like, will you eat anything else?
Oh,
How do you manage that? Like, are your kids good eaters? How do you navigate that? How do you get them excited about trying things? How do you keep their nutrition diverse? Any thoughts for the parents out there?
oh, definitely. So I have two kids. They're 10 and 8. And people assume, oh, your kids probably eat so well. My kids are not great eaters. They're very apprehensive eaters. They have very limited foods that they accept.
Mm,
And that's so hard because obviously I'm coming from this place of knowing and understanding the value, but they just don't accept the food. So we don't have to feel bad about ourselves as parents. We're doing the best thing that we can. The most important thing is to expose them, right, in a no pressure environment. So for me, the first step on that was let's make a veggie garden. Let's
mm,
plant something together. So my
yes.
child that's the pickiest eater, she'll eat lots of greens and herbs. And I swear it's because she had her hands in the dirt and she saw it
Yeah.
grow. And that was really exciting. And they like to get involved in the kitchen. My kids are so funny. When asked by others, they say that they're a foodie and they love to eat and they eat all these things that I make. And it makes me laugh because it's not true.
It's all
They
lies.
have this self identity of that, like, oh yeah, I tried this, I eat that. So, but that's going to pay off. Like 10 years from now, I
Mhm.
know they will be that way. They want to, they have that intent. But repeated exposures, having it on the plate. I'm a big fan of family meals,
Yes.
having the style of instead of here's your plate, here's a bunch of components. And going back to our discussion on meal prep, I'm really big on component prep. To your point of, I don't know if I really want to eat that. I would rather make a whole bunch of chicken thighs and a whole big batch of quinoa and a huge slaw, and then just decide what I want to do with it
Right.
later, right? I can make it into 20 different meals. I'm not, and it takes a lot less time. So putting the components on the table, maybe we're having stuffed sweet potatoes or something. Everyone makes their own, or tacos or bowls of some sort, and then they
Yes.
make their own, and they're more willing to try. Like my daughter would be like, "Oh, I put mango on my taco. I never would have thought of that, but because all the components were on the table, she just did it herself. No one forced her to do it or made up her plate." I think that's a really cool way of exploring adding foods.
It's a brilliant idea. And as you say that, I think sometimes being at buffets with my kids and they come back to the table and I'm like, oh, that was an interesting choice that I didn't think you would ever eat. But because there was, I don't know, broccoli salad or something on you just decided
Yeah.
to try it. And I think it's a very kind of low stakes way of them to, try something new, put themselves out there because it's, mom put it on the table. It can't be dangerous. It can't be that bad. And they really
Yeah.
get to choose. So it empowers them. That's a really great tip. I love that idea, kind of self-assembly, deconstructed meals that they can pull together themselves with
Deconstructed. That's
knowing
it.
there's something for everybody. I want to
Exactly.
shift gears, talk a little bit about your business too, because we talked about the big leap that you took. You shift gears, you've built this incredible community. You've found success. Talk to me about success. I mean, this is a topic I love talking about.
Yeah.
Everyone has a different definition. I wonder if your definition has changed over the years. How do you measure your success? How do you feel about success, and has it evolved?
Yeah, certainly it's evolved. I think the more experience I get and the more I live the life that I've created for myself with each path in this business journey has redefined what success looks like to me. And I think
Yeah.
it's almost giving myself permission. Oh, I could actually dream bigger. Oh, I could actually build this dream life for myself or have this level of freedom or whatever that looks like. I can actually structure this. I could go for that. So I think my definition of success keeps moving forward because I think, from a very closed minded idea of success. My career before this was in a not for profit. So nothing about anything I've ever done was around making money. And so when I went out on my own, I was like, oh, maybe I could, help some women, or maybe I could make some grocery money. It wasn't even in the realm of my
Hmm.
possibility that I could even make more than in my full-time job when I was working for someone else that was paying me, from the
Right.
government. It wasn't even in the realm of possibility. So now and I hear this often, and it's so true. My definition of success now is really being able to structure the life that I want to live for that time
Amazing.
in my life, right? As you know, of kids of this age around 10 or so, I want to be there for everything. I want to walk my kids to and from school because I know I only have a couple of years of that left. I want, right? It's
Yes.
we're getting to the preteen ages. So that right now, and being able to say yes to things, to opportunities, to ways that I can invest in myself, in my future, in my family. That's my current definition of success.
Yes. I love that. And I couldn't agree more. And you said the word freedom, you said the word choices, saying yes. That is the gift, right? Is having the ability to do what you want to do, how you want to do it, with who you want to do it. And I'm thrilled for you. I also want to point out, I mean, you have this amazing following on Instagram. People should go find you at the Food
Yeah.
Doula. You've got your second cookbook coming out in the fall of 2025. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if all goes well,
Yes.
which I'm sure it will. And but you also offer courses, if in case other people who are in this space of serving and supporting women at various stages of their lives want to really enhance their nutrition knowledge. Where did that come from? Because that seems, again, you seem very compelled to want to share and help as many people as you can. Was this really realizing that you could do more with an army, or this is a bigger way to get the message out? And but I know you also teach, so maybe this was just kind of filling that void. Tell me a little bit more about your courses.
Yeah. So, where this came from, and some of the advice that I got early on through coaching that I did, was this resounding message that it's not about me. It
Mm,
really has to be where my audience, where those that I'm serving who actually want support from me, what do they want? And so, what ended up happening was the number one DM I got on Instagram was from other professionals, whether they
mm,
were doulas or nutritionists or midwives, and they were saying, oh my gosh, this topic is so important. I want to support my clients with nutrition. I see that this is a gap. I see that this is making an
yeah.
impact, and I don't feel prepared to support them. And they're not being supported by their primary care provider because we don't teach nutrition in a comprehensive way, and the nuances of pregnancy and postpartum in medical schools, and midwives are the same. And it's not to the fault of the clinicians, it's the system. And so there was this gap, and they said, if you would create a course, I would take it. So I knew enough at that point to know that if someone was saying to me, if you developed this, like, I would take it, I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I would say it probably was like 6 to 8 months after I started getting that question a lot, where I did it. I pre-sold it. I hadn't even developed a single class yet, but I bet on myself. I know I can do this. My entire 10-year career before this was teaching and translating knowledge into practice. I taught professionals at healthcare institutions all across the province. This is my wheelhouse. So the fact that I can connect this new topic that I'm so passionate about and the skill set that I did work on for so long, the fact that this came together was so aligned for me. So I ran with that. And now that's the majority of what I do now. I do still support women one-on-one. Obviously, I do the cookbooks, but being able to train fellow professionals to incorporate nutrition into the care of their clients is the number one thing I do. I love it. And as you said, it moves that mission forward a whole lot more. We can do so much more collectively than I can do individually. And so many women want that, and it's so missing. So the more of us that are trained to incorporate that, the better, and feel confident they can have those conversations.
It's incredible. And I do think there's so much power in that self-education around nutrition. I mean, we're learning more and more every day about nutrition for healing, nutrition for wellness, for energy, for, for anything going on. I would say, look back at your nutrition. Are you really fueling your body? Are you taking care of yourself? So I'm thrilled to hear practitioners who are out there taking care of women and anybody really have a base knowledge in this. Like you always say, the exercise without the nutrition is not going to probably get you the life and health and fitness results that you want. It's such a critical component. I've always been fascinated with nutrition. It's something I love leaning into because you're right. It's like a medicine and it's like a passion. It's all these wonderful things, for the body and the soul and the mind, and really love the topics. Love what you're doing. I want to ask you, this is a leadership podcast, and I really love that you're leading this movement towards connecting us with our food. You really leaned in first with pregnancy and the postpartum journey. It sounds like you're going to be expanding that out to really, and again, I tell everyone listening, her recipes are delicious and they're good for everybody. And I encourage you to go check it out because it just takes a lot of the stress out of, and again, we kind of joked about it, but it's not making the food, it's thinking about what to make. Like I can
Oh, it
make
so
food,
is.
but I don't want to think about what I'm going to make or decide what I'm going to make. That's the toughest part. It's not the making.
Yes.
So
Mental
you take
energy.
so much stress. Yeah, you take so much stress out of even coming up with ideas. And yeah, I think the work that you're doing is incredibly important, and you're leading this movement towards getting us all to a place where we have a better relationship with food and we can spread that knowledge with each other. Do you see yourself as a leader? Do you, how would you define a great leader?
Ooh, there's so much there, isn't there? And good leaders can look so many different ways and
Yes.
operate so many different ways. But I think the biggest thing for me for a good leader is being willing to do it differently and not ask for permission and not need an example who walked that exact
Yes.
path before you, because I think that really holds us back. Like, I don't see anyone talking about it in this way or forming their business this way. It's not how it should be done. Then you can't be a leader, and you might not find success because then it won't be authentic to who you are and what you actually want to say and the mark that you can make. So I really do think being willing to do it differently, being willing not to ask for permission, not to have a path, to me, that's what strikes me for leaders, because you see them differently and you want to watch them because you're thinking, there's something different about her. I'm going to watch her. I can learn from her, and I already feel that growth happening. To me, that's the most important thing.
That's fantastic. I love that. No one's ever said it that way, and I think that's amazing.
Okay.
One final question, and then we're going to do some rapid fire because I'm not letting you go without some rapid fire.
Okay, yay.
Is just, if you've had this amazing journey, a great career, you're building a family, you decided to pivot, you decided to bet on yourself, you built this thing to serve others. What kind of advice, having gone through all of this, would you go back and give your younger self?
Oh, I would give my younger self the permission to create and the permission to
Mm,
I don't I don't know how I could say it to my younger self, but I was so much in a box of, you go to school, you go to university, and then hopefully your professor hires you, which is what happened to me, and then you do what you asked. Like, I was so that kid. I was that young person. I wish I could go back and give myself the opportunity to try a business. Now, when I see my daughter's friends, they're like, oh, I have this scrunchy business, or I'm selling my art. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, go do that. I wish I could tell myself, try something on your own. That I wish I could have started earlier with that. Go out and try it, like offer a class, start a business. It doesn't matter what it was, but start getting some of that under your belt, because I think it's so essential. And I have learned the lessons obviously as I've gone, but I still feel like I'm only a beginner. So I wish I could tell my past self that.
Great advice. I think so too. I always still tell people like try living on your own for a bit. I living on my own was
Right.
such an and again, I know these days it's expensive to live on your own and it's expensive to start a business and travel and do all these things we want to recommend people do, but you got
Right.
to do them. I was the same way. I couldn't wait to just start my career and do the things that were along the path of, the approved path of life, of the
Right.
things you should be doing. And I look back and it's all the times that I deviated accidentally where I had the most fun.
Right. Right. I love
And at the
that.
time it was devastating, but in hindsight, you're like, that was amazing. It didn't go the way
Yeah.
it should go, quote unquote, but it went the way
Yeah.
exactly as it was meant
So
to.
true.
So, okay, so here's some rapid fire questions. We're going to be quick.
Okay.
Um, Food should be,
Delicious.
mhm, I agree.
Number one.
What's your favorite hobby or pastime when you're not making delicious food and enriching the world?
Reading and being by the water.
Oh, yeah. I don't
Mm-hmm.
read, but I
So
like being by the water.
that's fair.
I mean, I can read, just to clarify, but
I will say I
yes,
can.
yes, I can. I can read. If you could collaborate with any person or company to, move your mission forward, who would you love to work with?
Ooh, I would work with someone that could just get the most traction ever and people would listen. Sounds so terrible, but probably someone like a Kardashian. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because
Mhm.
women need to know that you don't have to accept how you're feeling. Can I give you a 1 minute story
Yes.
on this? So there was a blog post published on Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop website. And it was
Mhm.
this doctor that was supporting a lot of women in their postpartum years who were feeling just absolutely awful. The ways that many of us have been told are normal because we're postpartum. We've got anxiety and we're tired. Our hair is not great. It's kind of falling out. Our complexion's not great. We have low libido, all of these things. And he named it. He named it postnatal depletion. That
Oh.
blog post got so many hundreds of thousands of views because women saw themselves in that Gwyneth Paltrow started her own publishing company because of that blog post so she could pay this doctor to write a book on it. And to me, that
Mhm.
always sticks in my brain of if we had this immense reach, women are like, yes, this is me. I don't have to feel this way. I deserve better because someone coined it as a term, almost like a medical condition, although it's not. So something
Yeah.
like that to get that message out there so women are like, wait, I don't have to accept feeling this way. Food can help me in these ways I never believed. So someone just to get like Gwyneth, right? To get
Yes.
this massive reach out.
Makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, it's so true. I mean, it doesn't sometimes matter where it comes from as long as people get the message and then it sticks.
Exactly.
So that's important.
That's what it is.
Um, a bucket list item that you have already checked off your bucket list.
Oh, being an author, having my cookbook published was the ultimate bucket list that I never thought I would achieve. Absolutely.
That's amazing. And final question, although I'm sure they're all your favorites, but do you have a specific recipe in your, let's say your first cookbook, because we don't want to divulge anything from the second one yet. Do you have a
Yeah.
favorite recipe?
I do. It's called the Golden Mama Healing Stew. And why it's my favorite is it was a complete
Mm.
accident. I had a bunch of things. I'm the worst with labeling my meals in the freezer. I'll be like, I know what this is. Of course, I'm going to remember. I never do. I never do. So I went in the freezer and I was like, oh, okay, I have this curry. I have 2 mason jars of it. I'm going to take it out, pour it into a pot, only to find out that one of them was a curry and one of them was like a lentil vegetable soup. But I was like,
Oh,
and I dumped them both in the pot at the same time. And it was delicious. So then I
mm.
developed this recipe that is like a vegetable stew, but it's also like a curry. It's got cashews in it and lentil.
Oh,
It's so
yummy.
yummy. And it's so good for us. It's so immensely healing, like lots of turmeric and healing spices. And so that I have this big connection because I remember so vividly that moment. And when I shot that recipe for the first book, I put my daughter's hospital bracelets in the photo. So it
Oh,
has, it's sort of
yeah.
hidden, but I know it's there. And so that's my favorite for those reasons.
What a beautiful mistake. I love that. I do, but it's funny you say I do that all the time. Well, I'll take something out of the freezer and I think it's pasta sauce. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
ooh, it's chili. I was way wrong.
Exactly.
Guess what? We're not having pasta for
Always.
dinner. We're having chili. Yeah. Well, listen, this
Surprise.
is such a pleasure. I hope people follow you for, great ideas, some inspiration, and even learning. You talk so much about different vitamins and nutrients. You're debunking things, you're giving tips and tricks to make life easier. I just love that the work that you're doing is just so positive and supportive in ways that, let's be honest, like eating and meals and food is such a big part of our lives. And, it's nice to have a little bit of help, but also a reminder that it's supposed to be fun and joyful and amazing. So thank you. This was a pleasure. This was such a treat. People can find you. We'll put everything in the show notes at the Food Doula. They should keep an eye out for your first cookbook and your second
Yes.
cookbook coming soon. Thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Marissa. It was so lovely to chat with you. Thank you so much.
We'll do it again soon. Take care.
Absolutely. Bye.
Bye.